Okay, let's suppose I have several parts that I would like to print out on a 3D printer. In particular, a model of 3D printer called the Ultimaker. Here's the printer in action. And you'll notice that it's going to print several pieces at once. And what we want to do is be careful not to place these parts too close on our bed so that the printing head does not run into the other parts during the printing process. So we're going to be very careful to do that. Now, program we want to use is called Cura. And in order to find that one, you want to look in the tools folder of Dropbox where you work for the executable to install it on your machine. Or you can download Cura just by looking in Google and looking for Cura, and I think the word CAD will also get you there as well if you put those two words together. Now I need to place the four parts that I was showing you right here in Cura so that the printer tip does not run into parts that it has already printed. So one of the things you'll need to do first is to export each one of these as an STL file. So I've already done that. So I've exported part number 3, part number 2, part number 1, and part number 4 as STL files. Loading up Cura again, I'm going to place the 4 parts out here on the bed so that I can print them all in one time. So I'm going to go to File, Load Model File, and you can see I have the STL files here. If I look for all files, I think I want to see the Sketchup files in there as well, but here I'm just loading files that can be imported into Cura. So here we go. I suppose I can select all of them at once with Shift and click, and it places them all out in space like that. This might be a little too close, so I'm going to use my scroll wheel to scroll back and place these out in space. Maybe those shadows are giving us some ideas about the maximum area that is needed to print these things. I guess maybe if I tried to get them too close, looks like Cura's pretty smart about not allowing the parts to get too close. So that's a really good thing. So we're going to space these out like that. And you'll notice that each time it kind of gives me a little bit of help in the placement. It's almost like playing a game here. And you also notice that up here at the top it tells me how long it's going to take to print all 4 of these pieces with the settings that I have. When you load up Cura, it will ask you what kind of machine you have, and I think that's a part of the process that I forgot to explain, but hopefully you can notice the name of the 3D printer we're going to be using right here. So make sure that underneath this it says Ultimaker 2, and then what you can do is go File and Save G-code, and we're going to put this in our same team folder, and you can say I guess call this one, for example, full print, so that way you know that this is the file that's going to have all of it. This will be our first attempt, so in case we fail and we need to reposition it, we can make another file called full print 2, for example. So this is the file, the G-code file that we're going to put on an SD card, and then that's going to go into the front of this 3D printer. We'll go through the menu options on the wheel, select it, and it will actually print all of these at once, and we can come back later to check on the progress. Now I'm going to try to show you a couple of problems that you might encounter and how to resolve them. So I have a file, an STL file that I intentionally made bad, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. You'll see that this right here is the part. So you can see it's not to scale. I believe that each one of these squares right here is about 1 centimeter, I think. So this is clearly not the right size of the part in comparison to these other ones. And the reason that happened is because when I go over here in SketchUp to Model Info, it was set to centimeters rather than millimeters for my dimensions. So I want to go in here and do the export again, and I'm going to say export, and I'm going to call this one good just to make sure that I fixed it in the process, and come back to Cura, File, Load, and then we're going to go to the good one. You can see that there's the part here, which is identical to that one over there. So I don't really need all of those parts like that. So just kind of get these four repositioned. So if you see a scaling problem, it's probably because of the model info unit settings. Model info units. Make sure it says millimeters for this particular project. Okay, I'm going to try to show you some other problems you might encounter. So I'm going to clear the platform completely and load up another file. Okay, so here is a very well thought out design. Not only does it have the four pieces laid out in space, but it also has the composite over there for comparison so that you can ensure that these pieces are going together. But I've introduced a couple of problems into this that you might encounter so that you can see how I avoided them. If I export this one to an STL file and then just load it directly into Ultimaker, well actually into Cura, and go to, let's see, File, Load, and there it is right there. You see that I didn't have it properly scaled, so it's way off the paper here, and or not the paper, but the platform. This is not going to print. Now I could try to scale it down using these scaling factors here, maybe by putting an extra 0 there, making it smaller. But the problem is that I still have this piece over here, and also they're all connected in one, so that it really couldn't print them out very well without the tip running over the other pieces. Notice it all kind of moves as a group. So I'm going to have to do it a different way. So instead, what you can do is just ensure that you have only one piece at a time. So I'm going to select all of this over here and just delete that and focus on just this one piece right here. So I'm going to save that as maybe part 1 or something like that. Okay, another thing I want to do is make sure that my model info is set to millimeters. And so you can see that I'm in architectural right now, so I really need to switch it over to be using millimeters. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And another thing that I've introduced as a problem is that if you measure one of these, I used inches instead of centimeters. So this really needs to be 1 centimeter. I used inches, and I want to show you how to correct something like that. So I guess we need to go over here first of all and get the model information, the model info units set to decimal and millimeters first of all. Okay, let me close that down next. What we can then do is make sure we have all the tools that we need, and so you might need to right click here and say large tool set. You can hide that getting started one, and that way we can select the entire part like this and resize it. So if you rescale it, sometimes it'll squash it depending on how you grab it. I think if you grab this one, it squashes it in the wrong direction. Perhaps if you grab it in the corner, that's the ideal thing to do. Now remember that what I have here is 3 inches, and I really need to have it be 3 centimeters. So I basically need to convert from inches over to millimeters. So 1 inch is equal to 25.4. So my scaling factor that I need to type down here needs to be 0.03937. And it made it a smaller piece, and that's a good thing. And I guess I can use this tool to center it up. Let's make sure it's going to work. Export. Let's try this again. And this time we're going to say, I forgot what I was calling it before, so I'll just call it B, just to show that it's a different file, and see how this is going to import into Cura. Load, and that's my part B. And I obviously didn't do something right. That's going to take probably more than 11 minutes to print. I'm going to pause the video and go back and see what I did wrong. Okay, so I've taken it all the way back to the point where I had the unscaled image where this is 3 inches and I need to make it 3 centimeters. And I'm going to try that again, and 0.03937, and then it made it much smaller. And then going into model info and going into decimal, millimeters, export, and I'm going to call this part E, or my attempt E rather, and load this in, see if it's a little bit better. So you check all the parameters until it looks reasonable. One last thing we need to look at here is the orientation of the print. This part will not be able to print like this because it'll try to print the material, which is kind of fluid. It'll print it over here, and there's really nothing to support that material. So instead, what we're going to do is rotate this part. You can go down here to rotate, and you'll see these three axes appear. I'm going to grab this axis right here and rotate it around, and notice it says 90 degrees when I stopped. And I might just grab this one, rotate around so I can take a closer look at it. You can see now this is going to print without any overhangs at all. And so that's really the way we want to do that. So we can go ahead and place this part and bring in the other three parts until we get everything set up here. I'm not really sure that I scaled that properly still, because it's really taken 27 minutes to print, which seems a bit long. Also, if this is 3 centimeters right here, I don't think I really got this the right shape. I certainly don't want to print it tilted up like that either. So I have to go back to the drawing board, check everything out until you get the part scaled properly and positioned properly for the print. All right, hope this helps.